Module 6, talking about musculoskeletal systems for special populations. This is often one that people get a little bit stuck on, and we're going to go through a few key points of key special populations that you may be working with as fit pros. Now, this is something that I feel really strongly about, in that you guys must feel confident to work with the type of client that you're going to be working with. And you need to know that as a level 2 fitness instructor, we are not specialists at working with any of these special populations. However, if we're doing a health related program, a basic health related program, then we are able to still work with them as long as A, you feel comfortable, B, they know that you're not a specialist in that area, and C, they have clearance either from their GP or their guardian if they're younger adults, except younger adults if they're young adults or children. So it's about making sure that you're covered and that you're comfortable. So let's dive straight into working with children. The main point for this, for young people between the age of 14 and 16, we don't work with those that are below the age of 14 with just a level 2 gym instructor certificate, because we need to go into the more specifics of working with children. Now, these guys are not fully ossified, their bones aren't fully formed yet, so we need to be really careful on the type of exercises that we're doing. We want to avoid heavy, strenuous and repetitive exercise. They need good warm-ups and cool downs. They need to encourage body weight or light weights only, not really heavy stuff, because we can actually be forcing a fracture to occur in the bone. And because it's not fully formed, it's kind of a little bit bendy. It's like a fresh, a green stick that if you think about breaking a branch off of a tree, usually it cracks and it breaks really finely and cleanly. But if it's a young shoot, it basically bends, whereby it's a green stick. And as a green stick fracture is where it bends rather than actually fracturing neat. So that's a big danger for kids. We also want to make sure that we're doing higher reps at a lower weight. So go for your endurance rep ranges every time. No need to go into power with these guys. And any stretches should be gentle, because remember, they're not fully formed and maybe they're not as in tune with what they're doing in relation to their boundaries that they have to go through. You'll know this if you have kids or work with them regularly. It's about their body awareness, hey? Let's have a look at exercise for older adults. There are a few key points that I really want to show here, and that's if you're working with older adults, they class this as 55 plus, which I think is a bit harsh, to be honest, but things haven't changed in that respect. And the reason why they put this as 55 plus is because that's generally the time whereby little things start happening in our body. We get to a point whereby we're not rejuvenating as quickly as we did, or big changes have happened in the body, i.e. women hit menopause, that type of thing. Stuff changes, and that's why it's classed as older adults for over 55. It doesn't mean we're old if we are over 55, I'll just say that. So let's have a look. The things that aging do to us is that it decreases our bone density. Now, when it's a small amount of bone density loss, it's called osteopenia. And then when it's a large amount, it's osteoporosis, and that's when it's really porous on the bone. And you can actually see an example of that on the image down the bottom here. You've got your normal amount of of bone, and that's kind of like a crunchy chocolate bar. I love chocolate bars, it's related to that. Your normal bones are like a crunchy bar, whereas an osteoporotic bone is like an arrow. It's got much more gaps in it, much more big bubbles in it, which means that this porous nature means it's just not as stable. So if you put these two chocolate bars on the table in front of you, you'll have to try this later, it's an excuse to buy chocolate, and then push down equally with your thumbs, you'll notice that the crunchy bar is not going anywhere, it's solid, whereas the arrow just crumbles underneath your thumbs. Now that's like an osteoporotic bone. It's not as stable, it's more porous because the density is gone. They will have less synovial fluid, and also they'll be prone to having a decreased muscle mass. Now, when our muscle mass starts to disappear as we get older, as it starts to reduce, this is classed as sarcopenia. Now, penia just means reduction of, and then sarco is like the sarcomeres, it's like the part of the muscle fibers. When I was saying the muscle fibers, the two myofilaments together equals a sarcomere, i.e. it's muscle deterioration. They also get thinning of cartilage. They have less elastic ligaments and tendons. They're more likely to get injuries and breaks and falls. So we need to make sure we encourage weight-bearing exercise to ward off osteoporosis. We want to include fall prevention exercises if they're a bit unsure on their feet. We want to consider joint stability and motor skills. Calcium-rich diet can help with their osteoporosis, so if you're doing nutrition advice for them, you can factor that in as well. Avoid high impact, because obviously you're more likely to have breaks and issues going on in relation to the synovial fluid in the joints. Things like osteoarthritis might be setting in, so we need to avoid high impact, which is jumping around a lot. And then we want to make sure there's a nice long warm up, so it allows time for that synovial fluid to get moving and inside those joints. Wow, it's a whistle-stop tour of older adults. Let's look straight in at pre-postnatal. So for these, I want to look at a little difference between working with pregnant women and also working with them post-baby. So first point on this, only work with those you feel comfortable of working with. I personally would not work with a pregnant female. I never have, and I keep it that way because that's where I feel comfortable. I don't know anything about it, and I keep it that way. It's not my specialism. However, I've worked with tons of older adults, so everybody has their different things and places that they want to work with. So it's entirely up to you if you feel happy to work with this population as well. Now, the main thing to think about is about the stability that they're going to have in their synovial joints, because they have this hormone which relaxes all of their muscles and their tendons and their ligaments so that they can have greater range of movement in their joints, which they're going to obviously need, but it affects all of them. It's not just for the localized area that they need. So we've got to be really careful with things like stretching as well. Now, this is still the same up to 6 weeks after, and we generally don't train someone until after 6 weeks post a natural birth. So if they give birth naturally, we shouldn't then be training with them until 6 weeks after they've given birth. And if it's a C-section or there are complications, it should be more like 12 weeks. However, that may change depending on whether the GP signed them off. Depends on the complications. Then the things we need to think about is avoid high impact exercise, definitely whilst pregnant, but also afterwards. You might want to be cautious about that because the pelvic floor is still going to be a little bit weak. Then we've got to avoid really strong abdominal strength exercises. They don't need to be working on that whilst pregnant necessarily. We don't want enforcing anything to happen. And also, they're in a place whereby those abdominal muscles are really stretched out. They're not going to be able to contract fully and allow any kind of range of movement there anyway. Avoid fast changes of direction, monitor temperature, avoid developmental stretches, because remember about the hormone relaxing. And obviously we don't want to lay a pregnant lady on her belly, and this is a prone position, because it's going to be a bit like an upside down Bosu ball, but also it's unfair pressure on the baby. We also don't want to lie them on their back in the second and third trimester. So this is just due to the pressure of the baby against the artery that feeds it. So it's just about pressure in that area. Lovely, so really nice in a nutshell on each of those. Let's now have a look at that quiz question. So if you're still with me and you're rattling on through these, then massive high five. Keep your attention span with me and go straight into that chat box. Go through, let's have a little look. What is the name given to describe the loss of muscle mass associated with aging? So I popped this one in there. We've done it. But I've just popped it in there in relation to older adults. Is it sarcomere, sarcopenia, osteopenia, or osteoporosis? But really, really great. Yes, the answer is sarcopenia. It's the breakdown and loss of sarcomeres, i.e. muscles. So muscle breakdown. Awesome. Answer is B.